For a very long time, I've believed that the medium of the Dominicis' work is not drawing, not painting, nor sculpture. It is the secret. It's a good place to start with. Maybe you want to tell us a bit about your own personal encounter with Gino de Dominicis?
Yeah, thank you very much for this introduction, and it's indeed very exciting to be here in the middle of this exhibition, looking at the work and talking with Marina about Gino de Dominicis, because actually I remember when Marina and I met for the very first time, I was a baby curator. I had just started to curate and work with Caspar Koenig. We worked on a painting show called The Broken Mirror. It must be 1992, 1993. And it was in Hamburg. And we met late night in a bar with Marina for the first time. And I kind of asked Marina many questions. And one was, of course, who are artists you were inspired by? And we talked a lot about James Lee Byers that night. And we talked about Gino de Dominicis. I met him in 1989, and it was indeed all about mystery, but it was also about rumors. I think the idea of the rumor is a very important aspect. I mean, I always believed that rumors are kind of important in relation to exhibitions, and I curated my first show, one show in 1991 in the kitchen, and only 29 visitors came over 3 months. So it wasn't a very public success, but it became a rumor. And he was kind of very inspired by a lot of, artists having created rumors. Very often there would have been performances where only 10 people would attend, and then it became, a worldwide rumor. And with Gino de Dominicis, there are so many rumors. I mean, one of the rumors which is persistent, and I've heard it again yesterday from someone who firmly believes that he's still alive. But that's for later. That's for later. So in a way, it's full of combinations and contradictions. It was a very fleeting kind of encounter. It was very strange because we spent actually a lot of time, but didn't talk very much. So we can say it was not only the secret, but it was also silence. When you visited him in his house, there were these long moments where he just wouldn't talk. And it's kind of interesting, this idea of silence, where you just would sit there. And it reminded me a lot what Ulrich Obrist once told me. He would always go to Bonnard, and of course he visited all the great painters, and so he would be in Bonnard's studio, and he would say there were these endless moments of silence, which were very magical. They just would look at each other, they would look at the work, and 10 minutes, 20 minutes would pass. And that's kind of what happened. And of course, the philosopher Gadamer was more than 100 years old when I visited him in his big house, and then he fell asleep. And it was very strange because I didn't really know what to do, because I could kind of impossibly wake up, the old philosophers. I was really anxious. And then luckily the telephone, rang, and it was pre-mobile phones. It was a big telephone with a lot of noise. He answered, Gadamer, in an interview, he hung up, and he was perfectly aware of what had happened. He looked at my recording device. He looked at me and he said, you will have greatest difficulty to transcribe my silence. Now, that was not even an issue with Gino de Dominicis, because he would simply not allow a recording device. Because during the encounters, I would always record all the conversations with artists. I took out my little, voice recorder, and he said, no machines. So anyway, so there was no recording. We were in this incredibly elegant apartment. It's the summer of 1989. Gino would not receive anybody before 5 p.m. I had suggested an 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. meeting. Was not a good idea. So they said nothing, before 5 p.m. And he would, of course, work at night. And it was very strange because there were all these mysterious figures. Almost like in paintings, there would be mysterious figures walking in and out of the shadows. And I remember, there was his assistant, Violetta, but in my memory, there are all kinds of different figures who would just appear, in the shadow of the apartment. And the conversation then turned really around time. I remember kind of clearly that we discussed a lot about time, and he was saying, and that of course leads us then very directly to Marina, because he was saying that it is so strange that there is in art history not more emphasis on time, not that there is a kind of a lack. Rauschenberg always talked about it, and he says, his paintings are clocks, that there isn't enough emphasis on time. And it sort of came to me when we then worked with Philip Arena on this time-based, piece, Tempo del Postino, we talked a lot about Gino de Dominicis, and I think he was really on so many artists' mind always about this idea of emphasizing the importance of time, but also movement. And I think this idea, I don't know how one would call it in English, it's kind of a dynamic standstill. It's a sort of an oxymoron, he was interested in his performativity, because there is a kind of a radical immobility. Because what we also have to say is that Gino de Dominicis radically resisted catalogs. He never wanted his artwork during his lifetime to be photographed. Gino, he was in a way very, very resistant to this idea that the practice could be somehow reduced to these two dimensions, of a printed matter. So Laura posthumously did this magazine, and it's lots of testimonials, and she asked many artists, and Marina has one of the most amazing anecdotes in it. And in a way we discussed, of course, there this idea of this it's an oxymoron, it's kind of radical immobility, because that's, of course, in many of his works, where you have kind of movement, but then it's sort of at the same time static. But maybe I should stop here.
No, that's fantastic. I think half of the things I'd like to ask you are sort of embedded here. But then, Marina, you have, as Hans Ulrich just mentioned, a beautiful story of how you met Gino.
But first of all, why I'm here, I think it's so important to pay homage to another artist, because the artists are mostly egocentric and selfish generally. And I think, just openly say that you love another artist and you appreciate the work. I think especially in these days when everything is so kind of orientated to the market and kind of success, it's very important. And I want to be part of this because, yes, I knew Gino. I met him in 1971. Earlier than you, long time ago. It was the occasion of the Bonito Oliva exhibition called Contemporanea. And this was a very special time in Rome because I was a young artist and I remember how special it was because everybody was there. All Arte Povera people was there. There was Mario and Marisa Merz in a very small little hotel. Mario was sleeping in another room and I had a sharing room with Marisa in Locanda. The Locanda was probably the cheapest hotel in Rome at that time. And then there was Luigi Ontani and Prini, of course. The story with the Prini was very funny that I had no money. I was coming with a third-class train from Belgrade, and I remember Prini was always asking me if I can pay him the breakfast, and I really had little money, and I would always invite him for this breakfast, and I would share with him the breakfast. And somebody told me, but he's from the richest Roman family, you don't need to pay him breakfast. I didn't know that at the time. But anyways, it was like a very vibrant situation. This Rome, I think, lost us since that time. It's not anymore like that. It was fascinating to meet everybody. And there was all kind of ritual. We would all go to Bucone to have a glass of wine, and then we'd go somewhere else for the dinner, and then we held in somebody's studio. And there was this kind of, the life that people would talk about work and fight about ideas. And it was, I miss this part, generally. It's not anymore like this, there's change. And I remember in one point I met Gino. I met him in a bar, and I definitely was thinking that he was croupier or some kind of gambler. I absolutely didn't connect him with any art scene. And I remember so well, because I wrote in this little homage to him, pack of cigarettes, I have it here. I remember, okay, now, let me stand up. So, anybody have a pack of cigarettes here to demonstrate this? No, nobody's smoking. Okay, this is pack of cigarettes. Yeah. All right. So, I'm the Gino. So he asked me, did I smoke? And I say, yes, I smoke. And then he said to me, give me a pack of cigarettes. So give me a pack. So I opened the pack of cigarettes, and then he opened it very elegant, in a very beautiful long hands, really like a card player. So he opened his hands, very white face, by the way. The dress, always in the black, but if you see him, you never could see him midday, because it's impossible to see him midday, he's sleep, it's always night. But if for some strange occasion you see the midday, you understand that this coat was completely worn out, that actually this black was so shiny and dirty, and it's just horrible. Only in the night looked glamorous and perfect. And his face is this kind of, the ivory complexion. So he would take my packs of cigarettes, he offered me the cigarette, so take the cigarette. So he would leave the cigarette elegantly and put my cigarettes back in his pocket. And that was it. So the thing is, what is about this strange action, it was such a way that you didn't even notice what really happened. You just was so normal and perfect, except that when you come home, you understand you don't have packets of cigarettes. And then start understanding his character and his nature and all the kind of mystery around him. At that time, he was more simple than later on when you met him, because he created his myth much more complex. But that time when I met him, as you said, he was observer. He would just be, for a long period of time, he would say anything, or he would just have this position of elegant and with a glass of, half glass of wine, which he just zips easily, and look at people, just looking at us, and looking at us for a long period of time. But one of the great stories from this period, that, he really was penniless and hardly any money in those days, that I remember that he was a collector. I don't really know name. That's maybe some people will know the names. That he asked him in the middle of the night, everybody was a little drunk, Gino told him if he will buy invisible work for him. And then he said, of course, yes. And then he gave him he asked what amount of money, and he made a check.
Was this it?
Yes, but
yeah.
we tell later about that. So then he said, amount. He wrote the check, and he said, okay, he's helping the artist, without thinking that actually is buying any work. And he said, this is invisible work. He gave to him, and he got the check. And this remind me so much of this wonderful story of the Yves Klein, when he said, if we sell on the bridge of the Seine in 1956, he sold to the collector artist sensibility, and artists pay, and the collector gave him the check, and he burned the check, and the ashes fall on the ground. In this case, Gino didn't burn the check. He actually went next morning and cashed the check, which was a good thing to do, but it's fine. But then what happened, the collector completely forgot for this event. But I think a few weeks later came the phone call to his house from the very established transport company. They would like to deliver the invisible work to his house. So he said, when we can deliver? So he looks at it, I say, okay, next Wednesday, 10 o'clock. So 10 o'clock come the truck with 6 guys, great coats, white gloves, carrying invisible work. So they open the door, I said, where we should put it? And the guy said, I don't know, next to this window. No, it's very sensitive to light, we can't. So they put somewhere else. And then show the photo now. So this invisible world, I came to Rome to see Bonita Oliva exhibition of Gino de Dominicis, first one. And this is the invisible work the collector actually, borrow to the show. And that's the myths, and that's the important moment with the Gino, which I like. And, the show in Rome, I didn't like at all. Somehow it was against his will, he didn't really want it to show. And didn't want to have the catalogs. And then this piece, what he called mozzarella in carrozzi, this was actually literally the huge carrozzi, with wheel, with the horses normally, without horses, in the museum, and there on the seat was big mozzarella. And this was mozzarella in carrozzi. This is exactly what you see what it is. But with the Bonita Oliva done, which really was wrong, he made from plaster this mozzarella, and so it was cheaper not to change every day fresh mozzarella. At least in Italy you can change mozzarella every day if you want. So I think this was very important to actually translate his work in the way how it was meant to be.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the same artist, Gino, also made a show for dogs, where the
dog
museum
show
was closed,
in Pescara,
and no
yeah.
human being ever saw it. Can you tell us about that? Because that
That
sounds
was
amazing.
another great show. So in Pescara, he actually closed the museum, and the door of the entrance to the museum, he only made small entrance for the dogs. So the dogs was running in and out of the museum, and nobody knew what it was inside, because nobody human ever went to see it. It was just exhibition for dogs. I mean, he had the humor, but also irony, which was very important in those days. And then, there are lots of crazy stories, like Adelina Fustenberg was making his show in Grenoble, and to do that, first of all, he wanted to transport the skeleton. The skeleton was 17 meters. We'd need 4 trucks to be transported, piece by piece to put it in Grenoble. But a part of this, the entire museum had to change the way how they work. They have to start 3 in the afternoon and work through the night. And till the 3 in the afternoon, they have to sleep. And when they arrive, he have to have 3 double espressos, right there on the table, and then everybody have to work. So they reorganized the entire structure of the museum to actually start in the afternoon and works through the night. I mean, that was, his power, that he can do this. Gino has so many levels of understanding the work. It's not just one. It's that we are talking about the anecdotes and small stories, but you can't. It's such a complex, structure of his personality that actually, the more you talk about him, the less you know. I think the history that he wanted to keep the mystery of his dying as same as mystery of his living.
Where do we position Gino art historically? And I know it could be sort of a burden of a question, but there seems to be a difficulty in positioning him within a certain group. And because you personally suggested this idea of Gino de Dominicis and his circle, I was really curious to ask, how do you see him fit within a context of other artists of his time?
It's interesting thinking about, let's take example Joseph Beuys. Joseph Beuys, in the beginning, he was really part of the Fluxus and Happening. And later on, he completely kind of overgrow this Fluxus and Happening, become Joseph Beuys, a totally individual, not related to any of this. I think Gino is the same. His circle was the people around him support and adore him, but was not actually connect an artist he knew. But I think he is a very individual, very lonely figure.
But
he does not actually fit in any of these categories. He actually grow out of them. You can't say that Gino is the arte povera. You can't say that Gino. What you can say?
He's not conceptual either.
No.
I wanted to kind of pick up on that immortality, phonetic misunderstanding. Because for me, the immortality thing is very, very important. Because first of all, when I came to the apartment and had this conversation with him, and I never knew if it was an apartment or a studio, he talked a lot about his attempt to stop time, what I described before with the dynamic standstill, this idea of disappearing and reappearing, because he repeated the same exhibition in the same place 1 year apart. So the 14th, which is beautiful, so it was the 14th of January 1977, and then the 14th of January 1978. And so in a way, that for me, suggested a kind of an idea of an immutable or maybe eternal existence. And I think that's something which came up a lot in also text. He has the Lettera sull'Immortalità. There is this letter he wrote, because there's, of course, also his, even if he resisted interviews, he wrote. And in this letter he wrote, since man cannot intervene directly on himself or herself to stop the inexorable advance of one's own internal time and prolong one's own lifespan, one has invented the means to make it that much faster. By intervening in space, he has indirectly managed to influence time. This operation might be justified only if space were finite and our imagination limited. Unfortunately, however, it is simply a palliative and a terrible mistake.
But also, his first conceptual work, when you just see him throwing the stone into the lake and the ripples in the water, or when he made in Sargentini his retrospective, what he done, he went to this childhood beach when he was actually swimming, and get the rock, which is exactly the rock he sit when he was kid, and put this rock into the gallery. And then on this rock he put a few things, and this was retrospective. So he was really looking into this,
You mentioned the immortality aspect. I think one of the earliest works that Gino de Dominicis is known for is basically this notice of death that he made for himself and published himself as a dead person in 1969. And interestingly enough, as a start for Gino de Dominicis, death seems to be something that actually encourages a potential. That decay is something that encourages some kind of alchemy or movement. And I think that's a really unusual sort of point of departure.
There is another passage here on the immortality thing, which I found, which actually Laura Cherubini describes when she writes of the 72 quest for immortality and the overcoming of entropy at the Incontri Internazionali d'Arte at Rome's Palazzo Taverna. Here the quote: on the occasion of the evening, an invitation card to a cocktail party to celebrate the overcoming of the second law of thermodynamics was sent. Refreshments were offered in crystal glasses and on porcelain plates. The table was adorned with silver candlesticks, and crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. Newspapers with sensational titles were posted on the walls, announcing man has achieved the immortality of the body. That was clearly an obsession.
Yeah.
But also to be in a charge of his own death was a part of this. That he just, there was a lot of rumors that he was very sick lately, and he didn't just want to die in hospital. He didn't want to die in another way. He wanted to absolutely have his own, decision. Which is interesting with him. First, he changed materials so often.
Yeah.
So he didn't have really like all the artists in arte povera had a certain style. So you can understand how it looks like Cornelius' work. You immediately know Anselmo, Luciano Fabro, and he was using whatever material is needed to actually tell his idea.
I also think that there's something in this respect interesting. You said that he's been changing and moving from one medium to another, and he was doing performances when he started working,
Also,
and yet he withdrew completely from that. Could you even, I don't know, do you have any knowledge why did that completely stop?
This is the thing, this is why coming now to this whole problem with the performance art, when it's so much to do with the direct energy dialogue with the person. So once the person dies, what is left? Is left over of the work, but still energy of the person itself is missing. And this is exactly his problem.
I think it's only, we should also not forget, I think that only a very small fragment of the work is still, known and visible, because there is, he did actually, over the years, a lot of work. And of course, this is one aspect of the work, is mainly focused on paintings. There is also, video-related work, even if there's no documentary on him, but he engaged with Gereshom, and he did actually, work for the TV gallery of Gereshom, did performative, videos. There is, more conceptual work, even if you can't put him in the box of conceptual art. So in a way, it's still very little of that Gesamtkunstwerk is kind of visible, just also because of this incredible resistance or rejection of a big book. Now, but I wanted to answer your question about the Gesamtkunstwerk. In the conversation I had with him, he talked a lot about Gilgamesh. So there was a kind of a fixation on that. He talked about immortality, and he talked about Gilgamesh, the sort of Sumerian hero who appears a lot and who is very, is many things, because Gilgamesh is an architect, Gilgamesh is a king, Gilgamesh is a builder, Gilgamesh is a sculptor. Yeah, and I believe that Gino thought in a way that the artist would include all of that. No?
Wait, we have to get to this Gilgamesh. I'm obsessed with Gilgamesh myself. I know why. Why? Because Gilgamesh is an incredibly important sculpture, Sumerian sculpture in the Louvre, which I went to study for a long, long time, and because I was obsessed by this whole thing. Gilgamesh is presented, as a god, but at the same time, there is one sculpture, when you see around him is the relief of water, and there is a fish running down the stream and fish swimming upstream. So that's the key. The idea of impossible possible, the idea of the magic act, the idea of the divine energy, the idea of this something that is not normal. This is supernatural, and this is where his work is so much based on. So that idea that actually you can have the fish can also go upstream.
And that's why you think
that's also the tentative to fly. Sorry, that's the tentativo di volo.
Then we come to this point, this piece, the magician. But then he has something, I'm always interested in charisma of artist itself.
It's a very interesting word also.
You have sometimes, I don't know, in his case, like to me, I remember when I first time met Joseph Beuys, he was just looking different than anybody else. Not just because he had a hat and he was in this dress, but it was something, his complexion like wax, his gaze, his just generally how he occupied the space was different. Gino had the same, completely different presence, that kind that you could not place him. I never knew that he was an artist to start with. He didn't look like an artist. He didn't look like anything that different. He was just different. And that difference is in everything, in his work, in his life.
You started talking about that oxymoron, and you've mentioned later this kind of paradox that constantly exists. And I think the point of humor going along with something very, very morbid all along is something very much that accompanies all of the practice all throughout. And giving a very, very particular point of view on such things, always keeping both things at equal level of tension.
He can be a magician, but he also can work in funeral. Perfect.
Exactly.
He has this look.
Yeah, but that the funeral is actually, I'm so glad you mentioned, because I just wanted to ask you about that, because, I really have seen this with him and
funeral,
with
that's
the
great.
funeral aspect is very important because the news with Gino's death was greeted with suspicion. I remember that at the time. For many weeks people were not sure had he died or not, and some people still think that he's alive now.
I'm very stuck with this idea of living art. So the idea of that was that actually that he thinks that have to be embodies some kind of life energy that is always living. That's not just the object itself. This is what I think also the Gino was interesting in the work of soul, and that's all about the soul. The soul. You have living art is the art with the soul.
I'd like to conclude with one question that really sort of is part of the reason why we really wanted to do this conversation, when we do every project similar to this one, we like to bring contemporary practitioners, exactly like you said, not to talk about themselves, but to talk about these artists and their legacy, and to try to understand what is it that it does today, not only what it was and what it described. And I'm wondering if you have anything to say about the legacy and what we could, and whether Gino has managed to sort of transfer something into practices that followed after him, whether his secrecy and mystery has kept him a bit in the shade still today, or...
But look at today. This is 21st century, and we're all sitting here, and we're all talking about Gino. This is perfect proof that good art has many lives.
Okay, I think this is too good to continue after.